Hi guys, and welcome back to the Emily Knits channel. My name is Emily. I am a knitter and a crocheter based in the north of Nottinghamshire in the UK, where I live close to Sherwood Forest with my other half and our two dogs. I have a little bit of a different video for you today. It's not a traditional format podcast, which is what we usually do on this channel. Today I wanted to talk about 6 patterns that I have in my to be knit queue. In my library, essentially, I own all of these patterns that are spring summer focused, that are size inclusive, and also talk about some budget friendly yarns that I plan to use or that you could potentially use for these, in some cases other than the recommended yarns, and in some cases they actually are the recommended yarns. I'm hoping that first off I'm really inspired at the moment to knit summer knits. I have 3 on the go at the moment. 2 are test knits, one's a currently released pattern. And now we've finally come into some warmer weather in the UK, I find myself really keen to knit some summer patterns or spring summer patterns, and to have more of a sort of seasonal wardrobe that I can access. So hopefully, I'm just really keen and excited to share these. These are all patterns, like I say, that I have bought and that are already in my library. So they're not things that I've just found on Ravelry that I think look nice. They are things that I have already bought and planned to knit. And actually in 3 of the 6 cases that I'm going to talk about, I've cast these on before and they've just not worked out for whatever reason, which we'll talk about when we come to them. But I wanted to share these with you and hopefully maybe give people a little bit of inspiration, or maybe give you some ideas of some yarns that you could use that you might not have come across before. And hopefully share maybe some new designers with you as well. So without any further ado and waffle, we'll get into it. The first thing to mention is what I'm wearing, which is I talked about it a little bit more on my last podcast episode. It needs no introduction. It's a Ranunculus. I've got a stripy dress underneath it. You can sort of see the stripes. But it's a Ranunculus, which is a pattern by Midori Hirose. Very size inclusive. Very summer friendly. I knit this in a 50% cotton and acrylic blend from Hobbycraft in the UK, which again is very budget friendly. I talked about it more in my last week's episode, but I think I've got the notes here. Yeah, it's a 50% cotton, 50% acrylic DK weight cotton blend. They call it cotton blend plain. Comes in 14 colours, and it is £3.50 per 215 metres, which is a 100-gram ball. So a relatively budget friendly option, and a really nice and easily customizable pattern. I also want to give a quick mention to, like I said, I've got 3 summer patterns that I'm currently knitting. One of them is a test knit of the Reveries Tee for Hannah of Herbgarden Knitwear. One of them is a test knit of the Wicker Dreams Tank, I think it is, by Celine Phaeton of Celine Knits, and the other is the Mika Tee by Yarn Me Up, all of which I've talked about in more depth in my past podcast episodes. So if you're interested in any of those 3, feel free to go check out my podcast and see what you think. Without me waffling any further, let's get into the actual patterns. I have my book down here, so apologies if I keep looking down to see my notes. I've written quite a lot of notes on gauges, sizes, things like that, and without reading them, I don't know the numbers. So yeah, bear with me while I'm looking down and checking things. I'll try not to do it too much. I'll try to look up and talk to you as well. So it's worth mentioning that because these are things that I've got in my to be knit list, I haven't gone through Ravelry and sourced things there, particularly from smaller designers or anything like that. So there is a range here of things that are more well known and less well known. The lowest number I think on here is about 14 or 17 projects on Ravelry, so there are some much smaller designers in here and much smaller patterns, or much less well-known patterns, but there is a couple that are a bit higher, one of which has around just shy of 2,000 patterns, I think. So there is a range. Some of these you may have heard of, some of them you may not have, but these are the things that have caught my eye that I would like to knit and that I want to share with you guys. Okay, so the first pattern I'm going to talk about is actually the biggest pattern on or the most popular pattern on the list. It has 1,750 projects on Ravelry, so it is far and away the biggest that we're going to talk about. And it is the Outline Tank by Jessie Maed Designs. I will mention as well that there is an Outline Tee. There are 2 versions of this. There's the Outline Tank, the Outline Tee. The Outline Tank has a tee, obviously is a tee, so it has a bit more coverage over the shoulders. The one that I have in my library, and the one that I most want to knit, that I'm most sort of drawn to, is the tank. I will get them right. So we're going to talk a bit more about the tank today. So like I said, this has got 1,750 projects on Ravelry. It's very much a popular pattern. I've had it in my library for probably at least 3 or 4 years, and this is one of the ones that I did cast on before. I was relatively new to knitting, I was relatively new to garment knitting, and I decided I was going to try continental knitting to make myself a little bit quicker, and my gauge was appalling, so I ripped it out and I took it back. So this is a fingering weight tank, knit from the bottom up. It's designed to be quite oversized and flowy. It has sort of V-neck. It's not V-neck, is it? But the cups come up like that. It's not a square neck or a scoop neck. It's almost a V-neck. And then, like I say, the drop stitch details that go up the centre, across your cups and up your straps, and also up the sides like a fur seam and up your straps. This is it's knit on 3.25 and 3.5mm needles. The gauge is 25 stitches and 33 rows per 10 inches. And it comes in a size range of extra small, which is a 28 to 30 inch bust, all the way up to 5X, which is a 60 to 62 inch bust. It's designed to have 0.5 to 3.5 inch positive ease. And you use, or the recommended yardages are 297 metres at the very smallest edge to end at 911 metres at the very largest size. A couple of things to mention about Jessie Maed's patterns. If you've not knit from hers before, she's very size inclusive, as you can see from that range. It goes from 28 inches at the lowest to 62 inches at the fullest. I'm a 50 inch, so I come somewhere in the middle. I'm usually somewhere around a 1X, 2X in her patterns. But she has a lot of inclusivity in the pattern itself as well. So she'll mention if you have wider shoulders, you might be better doing this adjustment because it might fit a bit better. If you have a wider bust or a larger bust to under bust ratio, you might want to do this adjustment because it might work a bit better. If you've got a longer torso, this is where you might want to add length. So very inclusive in the pattern itself. And she's also quite inclusive in terms of the pricing. So she has a choose what you pay pricing structure on all of her patterns. I believe you have to be signed up to the newsletter, her newsletter, to do that. That's really easy. And I will say hers is one of the least full-on newsletters I've ever come across, and that's not casting any aspersions on any of the other newsletters, but I think it's maybe once in a blue moon I get an email from Jessie Maed Designs on the newsletter. It is literally just when there's a new release or there's a testing call coming out, and that's all she sends out. So it's not like there's a weekly update or anything, but once you sign up to the newsletter you get access to that choose what you pay pricing structure, which I think has you pay 100%, 75%, 50%, or maybe even a 25%. And that's designed for her patterns to be accessible to people who maybe don't have as big a budget to buy knitting patterns as others. And I think that's a really, really nice way to include everybody in the discussion, include everybody in the hobby. The other thing she has that's worth mentioning is, I think you can access this from Ravelry, but if you're not, you can access it from the patterns once you've bought them. She's creating a shared spreadsheet that everybody can access that has some budget alternative listed for each yarn. She also tends to do on each pattern, and I'll see if I can put a screenshot of the Ravelry page up here to show. She will do like high-end, mid-range and more budget or affordable range yarns for each pattern as recommended. And there's different yarns in each range, most of which I think come from her testers and the yarns that they've used. So it's really, really good to have access to that resource and to have some recommended yarns at each sort of level of the pay scale that you can consider. One thing I will note is I'm pretty certain she's based in America, and a lot of her testers seem to be. So a lot of the yarns on there sometimes tend to be things that aren't necessarily super accessible in the UK, and maybe not elsewhere in Europe either, I'm not sure. So that's just worth bearing in mind, but it is still a really, really good resource to have access to, particularly even if you just find one of those that maybe you can't get hold of it, but you can find a better substitute for that. So I think that's a really, really nice thing to have on there. The recommended yarn that she has in the pattern, the main one, is Ritual Dyes Undine. Again, I don't think it's super easily available in the UK. I didn't actually look, should have looked. But she recommends a plant fibre yarn, and she also says you can knit it in a fingering weight or a DK weight, as long as you can get gauge to, fit what you want best. Do you want a dense tank or do you want a looser, flowy tank? Another one of her yarns that she suggests in those budget things is the DMC Natural Linen, which is a much more budget-friendly option. And I think that would be a really nice option to knit it in, definitely. You could knit it in any plant fibre fingering weight yarn. There's Drops Saffron you could use. That's probably the one that I would go for. Well, it's not the one I'm going to go for, I'm going to show you. But if you wanted to use a fingering weight fully plant fibre, there we go, fully plant fibre yarn, Drop Saffron is a really good option. It's 100% 4-ply cotton. It comes in 48 colours, so it's a really, really nice colour range. 50 grams gives you 160 metres, and it's £1.30 per 50 gram ball. So it's a nice cost-effective option, basically. What I intend to knit this in, so I would knit this with a little bit less ease. I would knit it more on the like 0.5 inches of positive ease side, because I have a vision of knitting this to wear underneath one of those sort of mesh tops that are all the rage at the moment. I've got a couple in my pattern library, one of which I'm currently working on. Well, I say it's a, what is it, a long-standing whip. A hibernating whip is probably the best way to put it. I'm going to apologise in advance if you can hear some really strange noises. Those of you who've been here before will have seen our dogs. And one of them at the moment, unfortunately, has a hot spot on his leg where he's just licked it and licked it and licked it and worried it. What that has meant is that he has to wear some quite fetching sleeves at the moment to stop himself getting to that. And he's quite upset with that. So there's some panting, there's some crying, there's some lip smacking going on. He's fine. He just wants me to take them off. So I will pop a picture up of him at his very, very most miserable. I promise you, he's crying currently because he's annoyed. I promise they fit him really well. He's just unhappy about having them on. So apologies in advance for any weird noises that the mic's picking up. I'm really hoping it's not. Can you not, mate? Thank you. Yeah, what was I saying? So I have an image of wearing this underneath. I'm knitting a Helix pullover, I think the full name of the pattern is, which is another Jessie Maed Designs pattern. I'm knitting that in some black merino yarn. I also have the Look at My Holes by James N. Watts, and again, you could knit that in any colour. And I have an image of knitting this in a brighter colour to go underneath them to pop through the holes in the mesh, and I'm going to knit them out of these. Very pleased with these. These are from Wildflower Yarn. Let me show you the back. If you want to have a look at that and pause that and go and visit this seller's pages, that's the information. Wildflower Yarns is a hand dyer based in Liverpool in the UK. She has a fantastic presence on social media. There's lots of really good stuff on there, and she does a lot of these sort of rainbowy, neon-y colourways. She also does something that I think she calls Yarn of the Month, and it's not a yarn club like you'd get a monthly yarn club. Essentially, she to make it a bit easier on herself, because she's been going through some health problems at the moment, and also to make hand-dyed yarn more accessible to people who might not otherwise be able to access it, she creates a colourway of the month, and I'm pretty certain it's only available on the one base. This is a sock, 100 gram sock yarn, and I'm pretty certain, it doesn't actually say on it, but I'm pretty certain it's 75% merino, 25% nylon. And she does a pre-order the month before for this colourway, and it's just the one colourway, and it's just that one base, I'm pretty certain. But you get, normally her hand-dyed skeins would be £22 per 100 grams. You can get it for £11 per 100 grams, so it's half price. And this was, I think, the February colourway, which is called Cloud Flare. I don't believe this is repeated. I think the whole point is that it's a one-off, and she dies to order for that one colourway, basically. So if you are wanting to try some of her yarns out, I mean, look at that really bright yellowy orange speck there. And there's pinks and things in it, and purples. If you're wanting to try some hand dyeing yarn out and you're unsure if you're going to like it, if you're unsure if you're going to like the colourway, or even if you're going to use it, this is a really affordable way to dip your toe in it, so to speak. And I want to use these to make my outline tank, because I think it'll go really nicely together, and then will pop through when I'm wearing like a black mesh top or something on top of it. But also will look really nice with jeans or with denim shorts in the summer on its own. So that is my aim. I think a superwash wool or merino is not really a summer yarn, but I do think a superwash sock yarn is not a particularly bad option for a summer yarn, because the superwash treatment gives it that sort of slightly more slippy feel than you would get from wool. It's not going to feel really rustic next to your skin. So that is the outline tank and what I plan to knit it in. The next one I'm going to talk about is the next biggest on the roundup, but it is less well known than the outline tank. So this is I think it's called the Argil tank. Sorry, by Clare, Lakewood. This has 609 patterns on Ravelry, projects, sorry, on Ravelry. So this is a bit less well-known than the outline tank, but I think still probably a fairly well-known pattern. And this is a fingering or 4-ply weight tank, which has got a really interesting construction. I think you sort of knit up from the back and then you knit your shoulders and you come down the front, but you should be able to see from the pictures that I've put up that you've got some horizontal bits, you've got some vertical bits, you've got your stripes going in different ways. And it's got that stripe detail, which is what makes it interesting, along with a tie at the waist. So this is sort of intended to be cropped, and you tie it in front of yourself. I think this looks so flattering with a skirt, like in this main picture. I think it would look great with jeans as well, or great with shorts. I probably wouldn't wear it with denim shorts, just the denim shorts that I've got are a bit bulky on me, so I would look smaller on the top because I've pulled it in with this crop top, and then even bigger on the bottom, and my bottom bit is the biggest part of me anyway, so I wouldn't want that extra bulk there. But there's no reason, you know, why you couldn't, and I think it would look great with them. I think it's got a lot of options for colour combinations on this. There's some absolutely fantastic ones on the Ravelry projects, and I would say go have a look. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. So this comes from a size 1, which is a 33.75 inch bust, all the way up to a size 16, which is a 64 inch bust. So again, maybe could be a bit smaller on the smaller size. I think the one that we talked about before goes down to like 28 inches. Was it 28? Yeah, it goes down to 28 inches, so there's maybe a bit more on the smaller size that it could be done, but it goes up to a really good size on the top. And the recommended ease is 4 to 7 inches. In fact, ignore everything I've just said about it could go down to smaller, because if the recommended ease is 4 inches, it goes down to a bit smaller than that, doesn't it? And the recommended ease is 4 to 7 inches. So a bit more ease than the outline tank that we just spoke about. This one recommends 3.25mm needles for a 22 stitch and 34 row gauge. So it's quite a loose gauge for a fingering weight yarn. And it says you need between 363 and 761.5 metres of your main colour and 127 to 266 metres of your contrast colour. The recommended yarns, she recommends any linen or plant-based main colour, and a wool or wool blend contrast colour, which is an interesting one. I think, obviously the contrast you'll be able to see from the pictures that I've had up is a really, really small stripe. It's not a big stripe, the contrast colour at all. And I think the reason for having a wool blend or a wool yarn is that you get a little bit more contrast, I suppose. If you were to do colour work, for example, in plant-based yarns, you wouldn't get that sort of knitting together of the stitches like you would with wool, and I'm assuming that's the same here. If you use a plant-based main colour but you're using that wool contrast colour for the stripes, it will hopefully expand to fill the space, and I think that's the idea here. So the samples, there are 2 samples. I think this was originally in either a pom-pom or a liner magazine, and there are 2 samples and 2 recommended yarns that she uses on the Ravelry page. One of them is in Seismic Yarns Cellular and Butter Sock. So I think the cellular is the plant-based yarn, and the butter sock is obviously the sock yarn. And then the other one is Quince & Co Tern and Sparrow bases, and the Tern is a 75% wool, 25% silk base. So again, I don't think they're super accessible in the UK. There's certainly not things. I've heard of Quince & Co, but I've not particularly heard UK knitters knitting with them, and I don't know if Seismic Yarns is available in the UK either. But a 75% wool, 25% silk base is not going to be hugely budget, so I wanted to look for some other options. So I will caveat this by saying the yarn that I plan to knit this in is actually Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which is not budget. There's no getting away from that. This will be my first time using Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, and I treated myself to some basically. It would be in February, it was leap year, because it's a leap year this year. A lot of shops did a special discount on the 29th of February because excuse to have a discount. And one of the shops that did that was No Frills Knitting down in Bristol, and I really like No Frills, and I like being able to shop from UK stockists. So I treated myself, I got caught up in the hype, and I treated myself to 3 balls of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the shade Sunflower. And that is what I fully intended to knit a summer top out of it, and that's what I intend to knit this out of, with some Wool Dreamers Sienna as the contrast colour. This is in the shade Ozetta, and I don't actually know how expensive this is. I don't think this is cheap. The Knitting for Olive is a 50 gram, it comes in 50 gram balls. 50 grams gives you 250 millimeters, 250 meters, and it is a light fingering 100% silk yarn. It comes in 36 colours, and it is £10.25 a ball, so it's not cheap. I got it for slightly cheaper than that because I think they had like a 20% off, but it was still the best part of £30 for 3 balls of yarn. So there's no way in hell, basically, that is what I would consider budget friendly or affordable. That is what I consider a treat. I treated myself. And the Siona, I will make a note to editing Emily to go and look how much this is, because I should have done it beforehand. I got this as part of I won a giveaway from Work Knits, and this was part of the prize. So I don't actually know how much it is, but I think this would be a really nice contrast for this, because it is 50% merino and 50% cotton, and it's 50 grams is 220 meters. So it's quite a similar yardage again to the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk. However, some alternatives that you could knit this in, some budget-friendly alternatives. One of them I've spoken about on my podcast already. I'm a really, really high proponent of this. I got this initially purely as my Reveries tee that I mentioned that I'm testing uses Knitting for Olive Pure Silk as the recommended yarn. Because Knitting for Olive is such a light fingering weight, and silk is obviously going to give you such a drape, I found it quite hard to find a substitution for that. So I stopped looking for silk. That was never going to be cheap. And instead I looked for something that was going to be summer weight, give me that kind of nice drape and almost a bit of sheen, and would match the gauge, and that's what I was looking for. And I came across the Fantasy Yarns Cotton and Bamboo Blend. So Fantasy Yarns is a UK based yarn company. They stock big cakes of yarn, they create big cakes of yarn. And they do a cotton bamboo blend, which is 50% cotton, 50% bamboo, a cotton acrylic blend, and a cotton merino blend. A cotton acrylic and merino acrylic blend. I haven't tried either of the other two, but I have tried the cotton bamboo blend, and I really, really like this stuff. So like I said, it's a 50% cotton, 50% bamboo. You can get it in either 3-ply or 4-ply. And it comes in a really wide colour range. So it comes in 33 solid colours, 3 melange colours, which are like variegated, and 28 ombre colours as well. So there is a really, really wide range of this. You could do this in an ombre with contrast stripes, would look great. And this one it's a little bit unusual in that you don't buy by weight, you buy by length. So you can buy in 500 metres, 1,000 metres, 1,250 metres, or 1,500 metres. And that's how they sell it, by length, not by weight. So for this, even for the biggest size, so if you were knitting one of the medium sizes, you'd need, what was it? The maximum you'd need at the biggest was 761.5 metres of your main colour. So if you're knitting one of the larger sizes, one cake of this isn't going to be enough, one 500 metre cake isn't going to be enough, so you'd need to get the 1,000 metres. However, 500 metres is £9.15. So if you're one of the smaller sizes, that's your main colour completely done. And 1,000 metres is £17.95. So even with the extra yarn you'd have there, compared to the cost of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, it's way cheaper. It's way cheaper. And it comes in some really beautiful colours. I'm knitting my Reveries tee in this in their lilac shade, and it is gorgeous. It's got a lovely drape to it. It's got a sheen to it. It's almost cool to the touch because of the bamboo, I'm assuming. And it's really, really lovely. The other thing you could knit it in, I got this at the same time to swatch with the Reveries tee, and I didn't quite get gauge, but it was very, very close. And in the end, I decided I was going to go with the knitting, not the Knitting for Olive, with the Fantasy Yarns, but this was super close, and you could definitely use this. Was the Woolly Knit 100% cotton 4-ply cone. This is immensely good value for money for the amount of yardage you get. I will put on screen the number of colours it comes in because I've completely forgotten to write it down. But it is a 400 gram cone, which is £20 plus postage and packaging, obviously. You get 470 metres per 100 grams, which means that the full cone is 1,880 metres for £20. It's almost 2,000 metres for £20. So it's really, really cost effective. Like I say, it comes in a really nice colour range. I would say, I think it's safe to say the Fantasy Yarns comes in a far better colour range, but that Fantasy Yarns colour range is mad. but the woolly knit cotton is a really good alternative. I preferred the fantasy yarn slightly just because that bamboo gives it a bit of a sheen and a bit more of a drape, but I'm using the cotton to make my Mika tee at the moment, and it's been really nice to work with, so I would still very much recommend it. All three of those I would call a light fingering weight. Sorry, not a proper fingering weight. And I think they would all work really well with the pattern and create a really nice drape. So that is another one actually that was cast on and then not finished. Purely because I realised that I didn't have much of the yarn I was wanting to use for the main colour, so I was knitting a size down. I hadn't gauge swatched, and the more I looked at it, the more I went, there's no way that's going to fit me. So I ripped out. But again, very much high on the list. I think this would be lovely for a proper summer top, and I would get a lot of wear out of it. So very, very high on my list of things that I want to knit next. Okay. So third on the list, we're going down in size. I'm intentionally doing that. The next one on the list is the Cottagecore crop by, excuse the rustling, by Gardin, who I think is Hirismakes. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I'm sorry, I'll cut that out if I am wrong. I think this is a really cute pattern. I've seen this on Instagram quite a lot, so I wonder if, whilst it's only got 174 projects whilst it's got 174 projects on Ravelry, I wonder if this is a bit more well known in Instagram and things. But this is a top-down raglan construction, and it's a little cropped. It's not a sweater. It's not really a tee either. I suppose it's like a little cropped cardigan with buttons down the front, open eyelet increases on your raglan that give it a really nice detail, and a V-neck, and then this lovely ruffle at the bottom and possibly on the sleeves as well. Definitely on the bottom. This is a recommended knit on a 3.75mm needle with fingering weight yarn. 24 stitches and 33 rows is the recommended gauge. And this comes in sizes from extra small, which is a 28 to 30 inch bust, up to 5X, which is a 60 to 62 inch bust. So again, really good size range. It recommends 2 to 4 inches of positive ease, and it recommends you use between 595 metres at the very smallest size up to 914 metres at the biggest size. The recommended yarns are 100% wool, actually, for this one. And the yarns that she uses in the pattern are ZZ Textiles Classic Fingering and the Woolberry Fibre Co. I haven't listed what it is. 100% wool yarn, I'm assuming, of some sort. You also, of course, because there's buttons down it, you need six 15mm buttons. And she does also recommend that if you want a more fitted top, you can knit this with 0 to 2 inches of positive ease rather than 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. So this is, like I say, knitting. She recommends 100% wool yarns, and it's knitting either Woolberry Fibre Co or ZZ Textiles. There were a lot of people there's a lot of variety in the patterns on Ravelry. Quite a few people had used Drops Bell, which I'm going to go into in more detail in probably the next pattern actually, because I think that would work really well for that. And it's a solid replacement for the recommended yarn, so we'll go into that in a bit more detail. Quite a few people had used Line Brand Trubu, which you can get in the UK on Amazon. It's not super budget friendly, but it's a DK weight yarn, so I wonder if they've done some fiddling to make this work, basically. So I'm not 100% sure on that. But you could use Drops Saffron. They recommend exactly the same gauges for the pattern. And again, 4-ply cotton, 100% cotton, 50 grams is 160 metres, and it's £1.30 per 50 grams. I also think I think this looks really nice in hand-dyed fingering weight yarn, so it would look nice in my Cloud Flare. Again, what I plan to knit it in is this. Let me show you that. It's coming up a bit browner on camera. There's a lot more green in it in real life. This is the Knit Pro Symphony yarn. Now, I didn't know they made it either until I saw it in a shop. Knit Pro Symphony Terra. I can't remember the name of the colourway because, as you can see, this is the third project that I started and ripped out. I ripped this out purely because I had too much on my needles and I wasn't working on it, and I couldn't remember where I was at in my increases. So I ripped it out, put the yarn back in my stash, and decided I would come back to it. But I do still want to knit it in this yarn. This is a sock yarn. It's 75% merino, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it is £12.25 per 100 grams. I think honestly this really suits a superwash sock yarn because that sort of variegation looks really, really nice in this pattern. So I would recommend that. But if you wanted a unicolor, you could use Drops Saffron or Drops Bell as well, which again, I'll come on to Drops Bell in a minute. I would knit this a little bit longer. I wouldn't knit it super cropped. I would knit it a little bit longer to hit just at the top of my trousers with that flare. And I think that can be really flattering on all body types really, but particularly slightly larger bodies like mine. It can be very flattering to sort of level you out a little bit more and just give it a bit of an illusion of a smaller waist that then flares back out again. So I like that quite a lot. The next top we're going to talk about is we're getting into the smaller ones now that you might not have heard of, so I'm very pleased about that. This is a pattern by Jacki Badger, who is the woolly badger on Ravelry, and this is the Summerdown top. Now this has 45 patterns on Ravelry. I've had this in my stash for a couple of years. I keep meaning to cast it on, I just haven't quite got there. This is a very oversized, lightweight, drapey top with these lace bands down your sleeves, dolman sleeves, and a full length, sort of full coverage drapey feel to it. It is a DK weight. She suggests either fingering and a lace weight held together or a single strand of DK. I think her samples are both knit in fingering and lace held together. And it is knit on 4mm and 5.5mm needles. It is 15 stitches and 20 rows per 10 centimetres. And it goes from a size 1, which is a 38-inch bust, up to a 9, which is a 70-inch bust. This has a recommended 8 to 10 inches of positive ease. So sorry, no, those sizes for this one are the finished garment sizes. So that goes with a 10 inches of positive ease. That goes from a 28 to a 60-inch bust with the ease on top of that. It recommends you use between 480 to 900 metres of yarn. And like I said, her sample is knit in Adventures in Yarncraft Merino singles held with their Suri silk. This has a really interesting construction. You do your lace panel first, and then you pick up everything from there, and there is a little bit of seaming, I think, but it's not your traditional top-down raglan, which means that you haven't got seams. It's also not a drop shoulder, so you haven't got that construction. It's a really interesting construction, and I think that lace panel just gives it a really nice bit of interest where you might not want interest on the front. If you want a fairly plain looking body but you still want some interest, this is a really nice pattern that would work. Drop Spell I'm still not going to talk about yet because I want to talk about it in the next one, but Drop Spell would also be another really good option here. The one that I'm going to use for it, I think, and I have it in stash and I would recommend, is this one, which is Stylecraft Naturals Bamboo and Cotton. This is I think it's 50-50 bamboo and cotton blend. Sorry, 60% bamboo, 40% cotton. It is it's a 60% bamboo, 40% cotton yarn. It is a DK weight. It's a fairly light DK weight, I would say, but that's because it's a plant yarn. I don't know if you can see that. It's not a super thick yarn. I have knit this at a fingering weight gauge. It just creates quite a dense fabric, which is not ideal for summer. So maybe not that. But yeah, 100 grams is 250 meters. It recommends you knit 4mm needles. It comes in 43 colours and it's £4.50 a ball. Most places I'd seen it sold for £4.98 a ball, but I have seen it as low as £4.50 a ball in the UK. There just weren't many colours, I don't think, on that. I have the shade Nutmeg, which is this really nice sort of, it's coming up a bit more pink on camera than it actually is, but it's sort of a tanny nutmeg kind of shade, yellowy tan kind of colour, and this is what I'm planning to knit my Summerdown tee in top. I think it'll make a really nice, I think it does look lovely in variegated yarn, but I don't want mohair in a summer top, and I don't want to by hand dye DK. But for because you get 250 meters for this top, you could buy 4 balls. Even at the very biggest size, you could buy 4 balls and have enough. So for £20, you'd have enough for a full top. And actually, for the smaller sizes, or for even up to some of the mid sizes, you'd probably only need 3 balls, which would mean £15 for a full top. And it comes in some lovely colours. There is a colour called Spring Green, which I've used. There is Ecru, which is a cream. Celery is really nice. Celery does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a yellowy green. It comes in some really nice colours, easily available, very accessible, and really nice to knit with because of that bamboo content. So that is the Summerdown top. I should have said it's sort of knit top down, but you do the bands first. we're getting into the smaller ones now, and these are the ones I'm really excited to talk about because I'm really hoping that these are going to be sort of completely new to you. Okay, so the next top I want to talk about is the Lotus Petal top by Iris of Hirismakes. You may have heard me mention Iris before on the podcast. I've tested a few of her designs. I really like her stuff. And this is one of her older designs, I think. It's got about 26 projects on Ravelry. And this is a bottom-up cropped top. It's intended to be cropped. You could knit it longer. Which has some shaping around the shoulders and things like that to make it a really good fit, but has this beautiful sort of Lotus Petal-esque lace detail around the bottom, which I think gives it a really nice interest. And if you didn't want a lace around the top, like a lot of patterns have, you could have it around your waist or around your hips. It is knit on 3 and 3.5mm needles. It has a gauge of 24 stitches and 32 rows per 10 centimetres. It comes from size A, which is a 30-inch bust, all the way up to size I, which is a 62-inch bust, and it recommends 480 metres to 1,000 metres of yarn. It's a 4-ply pattern. I can't remember if I said that. Finger and weight 4-ply pattern. The recommended yarn in the sample is Hook and Light naturally dyed Falkland Merino 4-ply. I think you could use any hand-dyed fingering again for this. I think it would look really nice with the lace. You could use drops saffron again. It might look really nice in something like this actually. But you could use drop saffron again. What I think it would be really nice in, to give it a really nice drape, but also to give it a little bit of a structure, would be, again, back to Woolly Knit, their linen cotton cone this time, not their linen, not their 100% cotton cone. So this is a linen cotton blend. This is a little bit more expensive for a little bit less weight. And the thing to bear in mind with this one is that it's actually lace weight. So to get a 4-ply, you'd have to hold it double. The cones are designed as such from Woolly Knit that you can knit from both ends, or you could just wind off some separate balls. But this is a 300-gram comb, which is £23. It comes in 23 colours, and the colours are lovely. I like the Woolly Knit colours quite a lot. They're not super full-on saturated. They've usually got a little bit of sort of maybe pastel vibes to them, and I think they look really quite nice. You get 580 metres per 100 grams, which means a cone is 1,740 metres. I had to read and check that I got it right. But like I say, it is lace weight. So if you were to hold it double to get a 4-ply weight yarn, that would give you 870 metres per cone. So most of the sizes you could get out of one cone for this. You'd have to get 2 for the next, which makes it not so cost effective. So maybe something like drop saffron would be better there. But for £23, especially if you were knitting something like maybe like a ranunculus in the lace weight, 1,740 metres for £23 is mental amounts of yarn. I wouldn't know what to do with that much yarn, lace weight yarn. So that is another one to bear in mind. And again, I think this is a really flattering option for if you don't want all the detail around your top, if you may be a little bit self-conscious about your shoulders or whatever, but you're happier about your waist. This is a really good option to have that interest there. So the next one I wanted to talk about is a completely new release that just came out last week, I think. It came out this month. It's by Sophie of the Knit Purl Girl, who, if you haven't heard of her, I would highly recommend you go and check her out. She has a really big pattern library. She's got some really gorgeous patterns in there for cardigans, homewares, summer tops, jumpers. I've test knit for Sophie on a few occasions. She's one of the designers that I love to go back and test knit for again and again. And yeah, I didn't test knit this one, but I've seen a version of this that just really, really made me want to knit it. And this is the April Camisole. This currently has 17 patterns on, 17 projects even on Ravelry. It is a top-down textured striped camisole with a sewn folded hem and I-cord trims. I love this. I think this looks really good. The one that I saw it in, the sample that I saw, or the tester's version that I saw, was in a navy blue with cream stripes, and I just thought that looked chef's kiss, absolutely stunning. She does recommend shirring elastic for the trim, so that's something to bear in mind that you'd need in addition. But it's knit on 3mm, 3.5mm and 4mm needles. It has a 22 stitch and 33 row gauge in the slip stitch pattern, because that's how you're doing your stripes, is with slip stitches. That's what gives it the texture. It starts at size A, which is a 29.5 to 31.5 inch bust, all the way up to an L, which is a 57 to 61 inch bust. So very, very size inclusive. And it recommends you use between 290 at the smallest and 630 at the top end meters of your main colour. and 95 to 195 metres of your contrast colour. So it's quite light on the yardage as well. The recommended yarn for this one is actually a really good budget yarn. I've not tried it, but I think I would probably knit this in the budget yarn, in the recommended yarn. So she recommends the 8/4 100% cotton from, I'm sorry for this butchered pronunciation, from Grena, something like that. I've never actually knit with their yarn, but I've been really, really wanting to. So the fact that there is now a pattern out that recommends this yarn is fantastic. So that is 50 gram, it comes in 50 gram balls. It's £2.28 per 50 grams. And each ball gives you 160 metres of yarn. The only thing is I do really want to knit it with this yarn, but I can't find a really dark navy in it. On the website it doesn't look like they do that really deep navy, so maybe I won't, but I do really want to try this yarn. There is also a couple of alternatives to this. She does recommend using an 8/4 cotton if you can, rather than a mercerised cotton, particularly because the mercerised cotton won't give the same texture that you would get with the 8/4. But there are a couple of other options. There is Drops Love You 7. Now I'm saying this with a caveat because there used to be Drops Loves You 8 and Drops Loves You 9, and it looks like at least one of those has been discontinued, and Wool Warehouse now no longer stock any of them. So I wonder if they're all going to be discontinued, but at the moment I could still find Drops Loves You 7 in stock on quite a lot of websites in the UK, and in a good colour range. So it doesn't look like it's going to be discontinued, but there's a bit of a caveat there. And that is the cheapest of the lot. So that is, again, it's an 8/4 cotton. It's 4-ply. It comes in 50 gram balls, and 50 gram balls gives you 170 metres. And each ball is £1. It's so cheap. So if you can get hold of that, it comes in 57 colours. I don't know if I said that. So again, a really wide colour range again. And that seems to be fairly easily available, just not on Wool Warehouse anymore. So get it while you can, because that would work perfectly for this pattern. There is also Hobby Rainbow Cotton 8/4. This comes in a huge colourway range. It comes in 97 colours. There's everything there that you could possibly want, I'm sure. There's even prints and things like that. So if you wanted a patterned one, you could. And it's not the most expensive, but it's not far off. It's close to the same price as the Grena. And I say most expensive, but they're all really, really affordable. So this is £2.25 for 50 grams, and 50 grams gives you 160 metres, the same as the one from Grena. I've never tried anything from Hobby, and that's the caveat with that one, is I've never tried it because I don't know how it works with things like customs after Brexit, because Hobby aren't based in the UK, they're based elsewhere. So that's the one thing to note, that shipping probably won't be as cheap because you're going to be getting it from overseas, but that looks like a really, really good alternative. So I would very, very much recommend that one as well. The next one I want to mention, flipping through my book, is the one where I'm finally going to talk about drop spell. So this is again, Hannah, I'm really sorry if I pronounced this wrong. This is the Jantje tee by Hannah of Herbgarden Knitwear. Hannah has some beautiful patterns. I'm testing it in one of hers at the moment. And I also want to flash up on screen really quickly the Seaborn tee that she does, because this is in my queue on Ravelry. I think it's gorgeous. I just haven't put a lot of time into looking for an alternative to the yarn or finding what yarn I want to use. So I've never actually bought that and got it. But I do have the Jantje tee, which I think is equally beautiful. This is a sport / DK weight top tee. It's knitted bottom up. It's got these flared sleeves, vertical lace pattern, along with horizontal garter ridges. And I really like those together, that give it some structure and give it some shape and give some shape to the body, along with these then flared flowy sleeves that give it quite a contrast. I think this looks really, really flattering. I really like this. And this is knit on 4.5 and 4mm needles with a 19 stitch and 28 row gauge. It comes in a really good size range, Hannah's always do, from a 2XS, which is 26 inches at the bust, all the way up to a 5XL, which is 63.5 inches. So a very, very comprehensive size range. It recommends 1.25 to 2 inches of positive ease. And the recommended yarn she uses is Tin Lena held double from Sandnesgarn. Now, the first thing to mention is you could use Lena from Sandnesgarn. I'm assuming she's used Tin Lena held double because that's what she had in stash. But looking at the yardages, you could absolutely use Tin Lena held double. Sorry, you could use Lena held double to get the same result as she's got with Tin Lena held double, because they're exactly the same yardages. For the Tin Lena, 50 grams gives you 220 meters. And for the liner, 50 grams gives you 110 meters. So that's exactly double the thickness of the liner, if that makes sense, of the tin liner. Now this is a 53% cotton, 33% viscose and 14% linen blend. So it's a very specific blend. You could use Starcraft Naturals for it. I really came close to using this for my Jantje tee. I still might, to be fair, because I have it in stash. But drop spell. Let's talk about drop spell. So it's a DK weight. It is exactly the same makeup as liner or tin liner. It's the same makeup as liner because it's a DK weight, but it is, again, 53% cotton, 33% viscose, 14% linen. It is ever so slightly better on the yardage, so it's 50 grams is 120 meters, whereas on the liner it's 110 meters. But it gets you the same gauge, I think, as well. It's recommended on 4mm needles. You get a 21 stitch and 28 row gauge. It comes in 20 colours and it's £2 per ball. So it's much more cost effective than liner, which I think is probably about £8 to £10 a ball, depending on where you get it from. And I really want to try drop spell. I haven't got any in stash. There is a beautiful colour called Rose Water, which I think would look really nice in this. And I think I'm probably going to knit it in that. I'm going to order myself some at some point because it's a pure dupe basically for that. And I'm really keen to see how that knits up with that blend as well. So that is what I intend to knit this out of. And like I said, there's a couple of other patterns we've mentioned that you could use it for. The Summerdown you could use it for. And the Cottagecore crop, I think, was the other one. Have a look. Yeah, the Cottagecore crop I've put it down for as well. Although it is a DK weight, quite a lot of people in the pattern, in the projects on Ravelry had used that as a substitute as well. And the last one, did I say the Jantje has 14 projects on Ravelry? The Summerdown, the Seaborn has many more projects on Ravelry, and Hannah has some really fantastic patterns, but the Jantje doesn't have a lot of attention, and I really think it should because I think it's a really flattering pattern. Okay, so that is all the patterns I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope that you have found some inspiration. I really enjoy talking about them. I mentioned at the beginning I'm really struggling with the urge to not cast these on at the moment, and even more so now I have talked you through them all. So I'm going to have to really fight. We go on holiday tomorrow for 5 days. We're just going within the UK. But the urge to take one of these and cast it on and take it with me, particularly because I've got them all in my stash. For at least a good handful of them, I have the yarn in my stash. I've got them all in my library and I've got the yarn in my stash. It's hard. It's hard, but I need to finish some of the stuff I've got on the needles already. If it wasn't summer stuff I had on the needles, I think I probably would justify it to myself. But I do have summer things that I want to wear. So I really hope that some of these have inspired you to go and want to knit some of these, particularly some of the designers you may not have heard of. Go and give them a bit of love, go and check them out. All of the designers that I've mentioned have multiple other patterns and they're all fantastic. I haven't knit anything. I've knit other things from Jessie Maed Designs. I haven't knit anything else from either Clare. I've forgotten her name already. I haven't knit anything else from Clare, Lakewood or Gardin as yet. However, I have from everybody else. So from Jessie Maed Designs, Hannah of Herbgarden Knitwear, Iris of Hirismakes and Sophie of the Knit Purl Girl and Jacki of the Woolly Badger. I have knit things from them all before. The patterns are great. They're all size inclusive. They're all very keen on that. And they all try and include as many inclusive pictures as well as they can in their testers and things like that. So I do really rate all of these designers and I think they are all really worth your time, your effort, your money to go and check out as well. That all being said, I really appreciate you having spent your time with me as well. And I hope that some of this has given you some inspiration. Like I say, introduce you to some patterns or to some designers you wouldn't otherwise have maybe known about or even found. If you're planning on knitting any of these things, drop me a message below or find me on Instagram. It's the same username. I'll pop it on screen, but it's the same username as it is here. If you're thinking of knitting any of these, let's set up a mini cal and knit them together. Let's run a mini cal and knit them together. Let's hold each other accountable. I love doing things like that because it holds you accountable. It gives you somebody to bounce ideas off as well, and also to share. I've got to this bit. How did you find this? How's your yarn knitting up? Things like that. So yeah, let me know if you are planning on knitting any of these, and we will set something up. But also let me know if you're planning on knitting any of them full stop. I'd really like to know what you're knitting them with, how it goes, and any other patterns that you may like and you think I might like to check out. Thank you very much again for spending your time with me. I hope you've had a wonderful day, week, weekend, wherever you are, and hopefully I will speak to you again soon. Bye.